let's get David Nixon's opinions on all of this. He joins us on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline, former NFL linebacker and BYU linebacker standout. David, we'll start here. I mean, this is a juicy topic, and I want you to argue both sides. First, why is BYU-Utah the most important football game of the year for both schools in 2017?
Well, you guys kind of just touched on it. I mean, here's the thing. It's besides it being the obvious, which is a huge emotional game, with it being so early in the season, this game really does set a tone for both teams. And so from my perspective, it is the most important game. I mean, if you look at the schedules, listen, Utah's got a tough schedule this year. You look at who they play and when they play. They've got to play at UW. They've got to play at USC. And they've got Stanford, who's picked, third in conference behind those two. And so they picked the short straw this year and who they've got to face in the Pac-12, and they don't have an easy schedule. So if I'm looking at them, I'm saying let's take some moral victories. So for us, the big game this year for us has got to be BYU to beat them. And then, of course, BYU, you look at Utah, and you're on a losing streak right now, and you've got to pick one up. And you're right, BYU, they don't have a conference, and so these type of wins are crucial for them because when you're building a program where you're trying to get national recognition, national relevance, you got to win these games. You've got to win them early. But I think the biggest thing is just momentum, is catching that momentum early in the season. And then beyond that, I mean, it's big for both schools because of recruiting. I mean, look at up and down both teams' rosters. You've got a lot of local kids there, and local kids pay attention to this game. I mean, it's a huge game within the state. And for recruiting purposes, you've got to be able to tout that you beat the team up north and vice versa. And so that's why I would argue for sure this is the most important game. And I think you talk to players, and I think they would say the same. I mean, even if you're Utah, we got the rest of the Pac-12, but believe me, all those kids up there want to be BYU, and I can guarantee all the BYU kids want to be Utah.
Now, there's the case of Jamal Williams, however, who said, I don't really feel that way. He's not a guy that grew up in the state of Utah, and he was outspoken about not paying any more attention to the Utah-BYU rivalry than, say, any other team that BYU plays in Independence. How would you respond to something like that?
Well, I think he's an outlier. I'll say that I didn't grow up in the rivalry either. I grew up in Texas, came up here, but I was quickly introduced to the rivalry and realized that this isn't just another game. Coaches can try to treat it that way. I know Bronco tried to treat it that way, but it's not. It's not just another game. And it's an emotional game because you have buddies on the other sideline. I mean, I had lots of friends that were playing at the U when we played them each year, and you want to beat them just like you want to beat your older brother, or in this case with BYU-Utah younger brother. So, it's
not recently.
It's a fun rivalry. I mean, and I think anybody that tries to say it's not the most important game is just kidding themselves. I think. Everyone knows that it is a huge game, and you've got to win this one, especially with where it's placed in the schedule for both teams at the beginning of the season, so it can set the tone, and you can hopefully ride the momentum throughout the rest of the year.
The question today is not what makes the national splash more. The question is what's the most important game on the schedule. And I brought up this point, David, and you're a good case study for this. Is it even possible to feel good about a season in which you lose to Utah? The 2008 team was a good team. There were a lot of NFL players on that team. That team won 10 games. Yet, that team lost to Utah, and it wasn't close. And the quest for perfection probably plays into that a little bit. The expectation was really high. How did you feel after that year about that season? Because it was a 10-win year, but there was a loss to Utah in there.
Yeah, no, I don't think you can, to be be honest.
The bowl game to Arizona didn't help either.
Yeah, and that's a whole other story in and of itself. But I think you have to be rival in order to call a successful season. That's as far as I look at it. I mean, I look back at my years. My sophomore year, we beat Utah. My junior year, we beat Utah. Senior year, we didn't. And the feelings I have towards those seasons all boils down to whether you beat your rival or not. And so, I have positive feelings about those sophomore or junior year. Granted, we did win the Mountain West Conference both years, so that helps too. But that senior year, you're right. We went 10-3, and we won 10 games. But we were ranked in the top 10 in the country for the first 6 weeks. And so, but in a year you lose to your rival, and it leaves a sour taste in your mouth. So I'm on the side of the fence where you have to beat your rival in order to call it a successful year. Even if you can go in and upset maybe a Wisconsin or LSU, it's still not the same. You've got to beat those guys up north.
Wow, even early in the season, let's just say for fun, hypothetically, just to see if you're even capable of arguing the other side. BYU goes 10-3 this season, but one of those 3 losses is against Utah. Let's say the Cougars do the improbable and they beat Wisconsin. They bounce back the next week, and then they take care of either Boise State or Mississippi State. 2 quality wins, win the rest of the games they're supposed to, finish 10-3, but a loss to Utah.
So a loss to Utah and a loss to LSU, and you're saying that it was somewhere else in there.
Boise State or Mississippi
either
State.
Boise State or Mississippi State.
Boise State or Mississippi State. No, I don't. I mean, it's a 10-win season, which is a great season, but I still think fans and players still have a sour taste in their mouth. Look, the BYU players, I mean, there's some of these guys that haven't even, they haven't beat Utah. And so there's a sour taste in their mouth. They realize that the guys take care of business. And so, while you look at the whole season as a whole and you're training in the off season, preparing for the first game, Portland State, and looking forward to LSU, there's no doubt these guys have that Utah game circle, especially this year with it being at home. I mean, this is a great opportunity, and to be prepared for that game. And then if you come up short, it's tough to rebound from it. I mean, you do, because fortunate for BYU, you still do play on ESPN. You still do play these powerhouses. You play in the SEC. You play really fun and exciting venues. But at the end of the day, I mean, that one will always sting. And so when you do look back on that season, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a tough one. I think even if you knock off one of those big teams, but you can't knock off your rival, that's a tough one to call it a true successful season.
There's not a single player on the BYU team who's beaten Utah. No one from 2009 to now, right? There's no one from the 2009 season left. I think of it on the reverse, too. I think if you have a season where you were a little disappointed in the overall win total, but you beat Utah, that you would feel better about that year than you would normally, because that win has special meaning. I think of it this way. A manufacturing plant, they can produce an amazing product and amazing products. But if they have a roach infestation, it doesn't matter what's coming out of there. There's going to be major issues with that factory. And that roach right now, infestation, is a 6-game losing streak to Utah. So we've talked about if BYU loses the feeling. I don't like that feeling. In fact, we've felt that since 2009. If BYU beats Utah, how will that weigh into the perceived success of the season, no matter how many wins BYU gets, David?
That's a good question. So BYU beats Utah. What is the win total? What's the minimum win total BYU has to have in order to feel good about the season? Is it 6? Is it 7? And fans, as long as you beat Utah, do you feel good? It's a great question. I think as long as you beat Utah and become bowl eligible, so say you beat Utah and go 6-6, I think fans, while all fans want more and expect more, I think you can still rest easy at night knowing that you beat your rival and that you can talk smack to your
neighbors. Now, wait a second.
And there's no way BYU's going 6-6.
If BYU goes 7-6 because they played 13 games, but they beat Utah. No, he said 7-6.
I know, 8-5's the minimum. Have you seen the back half of that thing?
Yes, I have. So that would suggest that BYU loses to, Hawaii and East Carolina.
Hey, I've already said before, I've come on the show before and said that East Carolina game, don't sleep on that. After going to Mississippi State, at the end of the brutal schedule, coming home and then going back East Coast again 6 days later, that's not a game to sleep on. I'm telling you, there's no games you can sleep on, especially with this brutal schedule and especially with injuries, right? I mean, when you're playing LSU, when you're playing Wisconsin, you can't take any of these cupcakes for granted because injuries are going to happen, right? And we saw it last week with Jamal. Jamal went down and BYU struggled, and you have offensive linemen that went down in camp that really offensive line struggled those first few games. So it's, we look at those and it's like, oh, yeah, that's a for sure win. But you can have some of these teams that all of a sudden their quarterback develops and they go from being a cruddy team to a pretty elite team. And I mean, look at Wyoming, for example, last year. Who would have thought they'd be in the position they were and with the quarterback that they have? And so you never know. But I'm just saying, if you beat your rival, it can make any loss feel better, and it can make a decent season be much better if you can at least have those bragging rights.
David Nixon with us on BYU Sports Nation. David, this has been fascinating. And I know that you played in the rivalry, and you certainly have a different perspective. And I am dealing with the classic scenario of head versus heart. And for all BYU fans' collective sanity, I want nothing more than for BYU to end the losing streak. But, man, it's crazy that it has become, because of the six-game losing streak, it feels like desperation factor.
There's a burden on the program right now.
Yeah, listen, streaks are made to be broken. I mean, BYU dominated in the 70s, the 80s, early 90s. just swept the U. And then the U, since 2000, BYU's 5-11 against the U. And so there's no doubt this is an era where they've had a strong presence and they're playing well. So I mean, there are streaks on both sides if you go back and look through the history of this whole rivalry. But as I said, streaks are made to be broken, and this year's a great opportunity with BYU, warming up against Portland State, going to LSU, playing really tough competition that really gets them ready to come home and play Utah. So, it will be interesting. I think it's shaping up to be quite an intriguing game, and both teams will be able to tell quite a bit probably more BYU, because Utah faces North Dakota, which you don't really use your entire package both on offense and defense, but BYU will be able to tell really where they stand rolling a Utah game, and if they have a great shot, or if you should temper expectations a little bit. But that's what's fun about this whole rivalry. I mean, you have streaks. You have Utah that's won 6 years in a row. I mean, that's the beauty of it. BYU goes, and hopefully with Kalani now, they get on a streak as well and win 5-6 in a row. That's the fun of it, and I think that's why college football is the ultimate best sport in all sports, because of this, because of the emotion that goes into it, and how we can talk about this in June, and we still have like 3 months until this thing even rolls around.
And we're fired up. Hey, David, great stuff, man. We appreciate the time. We'll do it again soon.
Yeah, always a pleasure, guys.
David Nixon on the Deseret First Credit Union Hotline.